Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Persona 5 Dynamics video. In today's video, I'm just going to be going over my general Yusuke guide, since as we all know, I pulled him with weapon. And quite frankly, my initial opinion with him was kind of low. But after pulling him, I'm actually having a lot of fun. His entire gimmick of his, as we can see here, if we go down to my Yusuke. So his whole gimmick revolves around his awareness 0, his inspiration. So his whole thing is all about counterattacks via resonance. So everything is counterattack, counterattack, counterattack. And I think his gimmick of counterattacks feels a lot better than per se Yui's gimmick of wanting to do follow-up attacks. Even though both counterattack and just Yui's generally what's called follow-up attack are both considered follow-up attacks, Yusuke just feels better, mostly due to the fact that it depends on the enemy attacking him, where in his kit he has what's called Keen Eye, where it changes the next activate inspiration to imagination. So inspiration is just his single target counterattack. So an enemy hits him and he has a chance to get hit, to imagination, where it now becomes a 100% chance to counterattack, and it now changes from a one target to a multi-target. So skill 3 is very nice. And imagination increases chance to counterattack 100%, increase damage by a percentage of his defense, and change target to all foes. If the effect is not activated by the start of Yusuke's next action, automatically activate it. So that means if the next time he uses Keen Eye, he hasn't used his imagination counterattack, and then I'll actually just do it himself. And as well as for 2 turns, gain a shield equal to 18.4 percentage of Yusuke's defense plus a fire rate, and increases fire resistance and nullifies spiritual elements. Also inflict taunt. This right here, the taunt, is actually very nice because it now basically forces enemies to attack him, which means he'll basically will use imagination, as well as having the greater chance of using a counterattack, because when taking damage from a foe, 65% a chance to counterattack. So I think that's very nice, as well as the fact that it also gives himself a little shield because of his each time a shield is gained with Yusuke skills, increase Yusuke's pierce rate by 20% for 1 turn. Now, of course, it scales with his actual level, but a 20% boost right there, just by him applying Keen Eye. So now he actually has a 20% pierce rate, which is actually what A1 Marion does. And then we also have a Penner's Focus. Each time a shield is gained, increase damage dealt to foes by percentage for 2 turns, and it stacks up to 6 times. So I think what you guys should hopefully be able to see here. All Yusuke wants to do is have teammates who can shield him, so that he gets increased damage, and for him to just use skill 3. And then his skill 2, deal ice damage to random foes equal to percent of Yusuke's defense for 5 hits, and when Yusuke has a shield, increases damage by 30%. From this second attack onwards, prioritize new targets and decrease damage by 60% for each repeated hit on the same target. Max decreases 20%. This right here should actually be reversed. It should actually be a 20% decrease down to 60%. So overall, a very nice skill. And it's skill 1, as you can see, not as leveled up as much, because realistically, you never use Yusuke's skill 1. It's always skill 3 into skill 2. Skill 3, skill 2, skill 3, skill 2. I only have it leveled up a little bit, mostly for the increase of his rating, but mostly because I run a lot of auto teams, and Yusuke will naturally use skill 1 on auto, so I want a little bit of it. But deal ice damage to all foes equal to percent of Yusuke's defense, and with a chance to inflict freeze on the main target for 2 turns. So really, his skill 1 is not as good as his skill 3. I mean, his skill 2. His skill 2 does way more damage. And then lastly, his highlight. Deal ice damage to all foes equal to a percent of Yusuke's defense, and increases the chance of activating inspiration counterattacks by 35% for 3 turns. So as you'll see here, if you use his highlight, you'll actually now have a 100% chance to inflict his counterattack. A 100% base chance now. So that means every time he gets hit, he will be doing doing a counterattack. And it's quickly going over some of his awarenesses. So if you are someone who really likes Yusuke and you like him a lot, you want to use him, I would say A1 is a nice stopping point for him, especially for any like low spender free to play. A1 would be a nice stopping point because every 2 times Keen Eye is used, activate imagination 1 time as a follow-up. And counterattacks activated by this effect to deal 70% of the original damage. So not a bad A1, not the best, but I would say A1 is a nice stopping point. A2 is when Yusuke's HP is above 70%, increase counterattack damage to foes by 35%. Again, not a bad one. A3 is just a general level skill level up. A4 is a highlight enhance after using a highlight. Increase counterattack damage by 30% for 3 turns. So again, a little more. But now we're getting into like you're investing a lot into Yusuke. Just another general level up. And his A6 is of course his most important awareness if you're going for. I would say his awarenesses would be A6, A1, A2, and then A4, really. Would be my opinion. Just because you're usually always going to be above 70% HP for Yusuke because of how many shields you're going to have, especially when we get access to King Frost. Well, his A4 is just a counterattack damage by 30%. Well, this is a 35, so it's a A2 over A4. But his A6, change the effects of inspiration, imagination to vision and emotion, and then creation. And it makes their counterattacks 2 consecutive attacks, each doing 90% of the original attack's damage. Also increases counterattack pierce rate by 30%. So as we can see, his A6 basically doubles his damage with his counterattacks. It basically doubles the attack damage of it. Not exactly, just because of it only does 90%, but it's 2 hits of 90%. But then also when you include the pierce rate of 30%, I'm pretty sure that's basically it doubles his damage for counterattacks. So a very nice A6. But would I advise going for A6? Not really. I would say a good stopping point is A1, and if you really want to push his damage, A2. But he is perfectly fine at A0 if you grab him. And that takes care of his damage. Takes care of all. And then for Yusuke's card sets, I'm looking to be using a Opulence, and then either a Meditation for when activating Resonant increases critical strike damage, or what I would rather use is Growth. When activating Resonance, increase own ice damage by 10% for 2 turns, stacking up to 3 times. So this is just straight up a 30% damage bonus as compared to just a 50% increase to critical damage. So I would say that Growth works better, but using a Meditation would work just as fine. And then I'm looking at using an Opulence because his 2 set increases ice damage by 10%, and then his 4 set increases resonance damage by 40%. So just increase the law of resonance damage. And then you're looking at probably using a HP, either a defense, or you can use a what's called a attack multi plus, which is a damage. So if I just reset my filter, so we can either use a defense, or we're looking at using a attack multi plus. Because what attack multi plus does is it's actually, again, it's a translation error, but what it is a damage increase. And then I'm looking at using a crit rate piece, and then finally a last defense piece. So you're working at, this one has to be HP, and then this one is defense does slightly better than attack multi plus or damage increase, but either would do. You basically just look at your substats at that point. If you have both a defense percent and a attack multi, if you did any sort of opulence grind, then you're just looking for a general, then you're looking for which one has better substats. And then I'm looking at either using crit rates or crit multi, or you can use defense, of course, but I prefer crit rates. And then lastly, this one you definitely want to use defense. And then his substat prio is, I would say, speed up to a certain point of where, generally speaking, you want Yusuke to go first. The whole reason you want to go Yusuke to go first is just so that he can activate his counterattack before the enemy has any sort of chance to attack. So that's kind of why you want to do Yusuke speed first. It's just so that he can always make sure that he has his counterattack before the enemy can act or do a reaction. Because I'm sure you've seen where sometimes the enemy goes before your teammates, some of your teammates. And then it goes crit rate, and then defense pen, crit damage, defense percent, and then lastly, and damage bonus. But for the most part right now, you're not really looking at min-maxing your substats. I got super lucky with some of my pieces. Like look at this piece. Like, this piece is absolutely disgusting. Every single substat besides like the flat defense, but even this is fine. This one actually did pretty well too. It just unfortunately this had an attack percent. But this piece is still fine. This one right here would be a great piece if this didn't have SP recovery, but the speed is very nice. And then lastly, this another really nice piece of straight crit multi and then defense. So I got super lucky with all of my pieces, again, except for this one. But your space card is very hard. Is going to be very hard to build to have a perfect substats on those. So you kind of take what you can. And when I saw triple defense in it, I'm like, yeah, let's go. But so once again, you're looking at speed up to where your Yusuke is the first one to act. But he doesn't need to be first, but it's just nice to have him first. And then crit rate, defense pen, crit damage, defense, and then over damage percent. All that. His weapons now, though, I don't have his 4-star, so I'll have to pull it up. But his 5-star is increases defense by 45%, and at the start of battle, increases counterattack damage by 30%. So his 5-star weapon is actually quite a nice upgrade for him, I would say. After gaining a shield, gain 1 blade spirit stack, increase counterattack damage by 2% per stack, and at 6 stacks, increases counterattack damage by 30%, and this effect is permanent. So as we can see right here, with his 5-star weapon, every time he gains a shield, gain 1 blade spirit stack and increases. So once he gains 6 shield stacks, he is now increasing his total counterattack damage by 60% with just his weapon right here. So a very nice upgrade. While his 4-star weapon is just an increase of defense by 18%, and each time a counterattack is activated, increased ice damage by 7.4% for 2 turns, and it stacks up to 2 times. So at a base, it's only a 15% increase, but of course, you would want to eventually max this out anyway if you don't have his 5-star weapon. So I will say his 5-star weapon is absolutely worth it over using his 4-star weapon. And in my opinion, I would probably go A0 and then grab a weapon. If you're looking to invest into Yusuke, I would say you go A0 with weapon. And if you really want to invest in him, then you go for A1. So just go A0, then grab his weapon, and then if you really, really like him, you grab his A1. But of course, you don't need to grab his 5-star weapon. You don't need to grab his A1. He's perfectly fine at A0 with his 4-star. I will say he will be fine. And that kind of brings us to the end of what he does, where he slots. And next up I want to be talking about is his teams. So my main team I run him on is this one right here, where I'm using Yusuke with Yaolin or Ren, and then of course using Yuki. And then of course you want to use Puppet. Puppet is the only navigator that works well with Yusuke. And then Yuki is his best in slot support right now because of the fact that she provides a lot of what he's looking for, and it's mostly inner skill 2. Grant a shield to one other ally, so this right here, and increases target's defense by 35% of Yuki's defense. So total right now, it can give Yusuke an additional 1,000 defense if I have enough defense on Yuki, which my Yuki is not built up at all. If I actually increase my Yuki, my Yusuke could actually gain more damage. As we can see here, I literally just did this with my Yuki just so I could just have a quick little set. This is all I did on her. And then on top of the fact that she also gives a little bit of damage, because I have her A6. Her A6 increases damage by 10% for Yukis and allies with Oath, and increases bless damage by 2% for each stack. So the bless damage portion doesn't really matter, but it just gives a general 10% damage increase for Yuki and her allies. And then Yao Ling is kind of the next best support for him. And it's mostly because of the fact that she provides a defense decrease as well as just a general damage increase. Increases foes damage taken by 3% for every. So defense decrease as well as damage increase taken. And the other option I would say for Yusuke is another good option is Marion. Specifically if you have A1 Marion just because of the fact as we all know. So A1 Marion just straight up gives 20% pierce rate. So very nice. And then of course she provides more HP. And then of course increases allies damage by up to a 30%. So A1 Marion. So I would, and then this is what I would run. But the general team, I would say my general use team right now is this one with them. And then I would go A1 and then I'll go Marion if my team needs help surviving. If like, for example, as we'll see later on with the guild boss, Cert does a lot of AoE damage. So I was using actually Luful because I was using Marion I'm going to be using Marion for my Joker team for that one. But you could absolutely use Morgana or Lufel if you need help surviving. If the not enough shielding is what I would say. And then right now, since we don't have access to his best in slot persona for Wonder, right now I'm using a Mithras. And the only changes I did for him is I put Rakukaja on him. And then I'm using Succubus for the increase of crit rates. And of course another Rakukaja on her as well, just to help increase my Yusuke's defense. And then once we have access to King Frost, of course we would want to use King Frost. But we don't have him until, we don't have access to King Frost until 1.4. Because what King Frost does is straight up increases main target's defense and ice damage, as well as he has a natural built-in shield. So, of course, if you really like Yusuke, you're going to grab this. But then we're going to have a tough time if you have Yusuke and Makoto, because Makoto also is going to want Bishamon, and then we're going to have to wait until 2.0 basically to have both King Frost and Bishamonten. But then as another just a general use one I'm using Norn, just because he gives, when he can apply defense decrease. You can also use, of course, Cert for the defense decrease. But it's mostly I'm just slapping on a high level, any sort of high level persona, just to help increase my Wonder stats. So I'm mostly using these two because all I'm really doing is I'm going back and forth between using defense increase into a rebellion. Since here we go, and then just using rebellion, and then if I want to, I can use Norn for either a guardian. I can even use a wind barrier just to help increase the give another shield, any sort of that. I can also use a Jinkuten for a revolution, of course, any sort of that. I can use Cert for Marukunda. I would also, I think even for myself, I'll probably use Cert right now. But as a general use team, this is what I would use. If you need help surviving for Guild Boss, SOS, then you can slap in a healer, like I said. Marion, Morgana, Lufel, all works, of course. No other character really works with him, just because every other character increases attack. These are the only characters that work with him that just give either a damage increase or just at least a defense decrease. I would say, I guess you could also use Soy because he does a lot of defense decrease. But I would say use this instead. And then, yes, technically they did buff Yusuke a little bit on release by a little bit of his A0. It increases the percentage of it to 88% from, I believe, 60-ish%. And then they actually did buff his A6, going from a 70% to a 90%, which we can see here. So A0 is doing 88% there, while if I turn over to my TW count, it's at 66%, so a 22% scaling buff off of his defense, and then actually just a straight up 20 extra percent off of his on his A6 right here. So his A6 actually got a actually pretty decent buff, I will say. Is it worth going for A6 though? In my opinion, no. And then lastly, would I recommend going for Yusuke overall? I would say if you like his playstyle, if you like the whole counterattack thing, you know, after you're going through his trial right down over here, if you like him, you like using him, you're all about him, then I would say absolutely. My only problem is that he's very awkward to build with being a defense scaler. There's only really one support in a unit right now for him, Yuki, until we get another standard character, Cherish, in the future, which shouldn't come out until after Futaba, so probably 4 months from now. And then just that's kind of like the biggest problems. And then he's also not really that good in the future. Right now he feels really good, but with knowing what the characters are coming in the future, with Makoto Nijima, Phoebe, Cord, Summer Closer, like those kind of characters coming out, I would still advise that Yusuke is a skip. I would still advise you to skip him, but of course these games are always husbands, waifus, any of those kind of things. So characters you like over meta, because it's more important to have fun than for you to be doing well in the game and being miserable. But with that, I hope you guys have a good day, good night, wherever you are in life, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye bye.